Well, let's bring you the very latest then from the courthouse in New York, which has been hearing over 6 weeks of testimony, a case against Sean P. Diddy Combs. Over 6 weeks then, two of Combs's former girlfriends, the rhythm and blues singer Cassie Ventura and a woman known in court by the pseudonym Jane, told jurors that he forced them to take part in the performances with paid male escorts, sometimes known as freak-offs, while he watched and occasionally filmed. Both women testified that Combs had beaten them, and jurors saw a hotel surveillance video showing Combs attacking Ventura in a hallway back in 2016. He faces a number of charges, including a racketeering conspiracy, which carries a maximum sentence of life in prison, sex trafficking by force, fraud or coercion, and transportation for purposes of prostitution. All charges that he has denied, though the court did not hear from him. Well, our correspondent, Martha Kellner, is at the court in New York. And just give your assessment, Martha, of what you think is happening.
Yes, certainly a moment of high drama in this case, Anna. I think we do have a partial verdict from the jury. Just to explain what's happened in the past 10 minutes or so, the judge received a note from the jury room. The attorneys from both sides, from the government and from Sean Diddy Combs' defence team, gathered in that room together. Sean Combs had his head in his hands. The government's prosecution team seemed pretty unemotional. The judge then read out a note saying the jury has reached a partial verdict. So just to recap, Sean Diddy Combs faces 5 separate criminal counts: 1 count of racketeering, 2 counts of sex trafficking, and 2 counts of transportation for prostitution. Well, the most serious of those charges is count 1. That's the racketeering charge. This jury says that they've not been able to reach a verdict on that charge. They say that's due to some of the jurors being unpersuadable on that charge. However, they do say they have a verdict on the 4 other charges, so the sex trafficking charges and the transportation for prostitution charges. The sex trafficking charges alone carry a sentence of a minimum of 15 years to life. So those are very serious charges in and of themselves. What's not clear yet is whether this judge is going to accept a partial verdict from the jury. He has asked both the defence team and the prosecution team to provide him with their views, and then he will make a decision. But certainly a hugely dramatic moment in this case. Sean Diddy Combs, the man who rose from relatively humble beginnings. He grew up in Harlem, New York, not 10 miles from this courthouse. He spent the last 10 months in prison awaiting this trial. He now faces the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. It could be that we hear at least a partial verdict from this jury in the coming minutes and hours. It's really a wait and see at the moment, Anna.
And what has Combs's lawyers said his defence is? Because he has acknowledged that at times he was violent in domestic relationships, even saying if he was charged with domestic violence, we wouldn't all be here.
Yeah, exactly. You know, they can't really deny that he was violent in these relationships, because there is a video that's been played numerous times to this jury which shows Sean Combs in the corridor of a hotel room in Los Angeles, apparently dragging his then girlfriend Cassie Ventura, who was a pop star. He was in a relationship with her for more than a decade, and he was very clearly physically beating her in this disturbing footage, which this court has been shown on many occasions. So his defence team say, no doubt about it, this is a flawed individual. This is a man who was violent in these relationships that he had. But the prosecution case is that he forced and coerced his partners into having sex with male prostitutes in these drug-fuelled parties that he referred to as freak-offs. Well, Sean Combs's defence team says that simply isn't true. He says that these women were willing participants in these sex marathons. They say that this was simply Sean Combs's private life, which has been turned into a crime scene. Interestingly, though, Anna, while the prosecution case lasted 28 days, 35 different witnesses on the stand, the defence case lasted just 25 minutes. Much of their case, in fact, was centred on the cross-examination of the witnesses, particularly the two key women in this case, Cassandra Ventura, Cassie, who is the former pop star, and a woman who testified under the pseudonym Jane. They said that these women were motivated by money, by financial gain, and in fact they had been in consensual relations with Sean Combs.
The early part of this trial was hearing from his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. What was the case that she made against him?
Yeah, really this whole case hinges around Cassie Ventura. She was the one who filed a civil lawsuit against Sean Combs back in 2023. They settled that case out of court extremely quickly. She received $20 million, but that allowed the government to then launch this investigation into Sean Combs. And as such, she has been the star witness for the government's case. She took the stand very early on. She was one of their first witnesses. And I think she was particularly affecting, Anna, because she was so heavily pregnant when she took the stand. In fact, she gave birth just a week after giving testimony here. I spoke to a seasoned trial lawyer at the time about her evidence, and they said that she was the most heavily pregnant witness that they can ever remember giving evidence in a criminal trial. But her testimony was incredibly disturbing at times. She detailed this more than a decade-long relationship she had with Sean Combs. They met when she was still a teenager. At the time, she had a hit pop record. She was signed to his music label for a 10-album deal. Well, in the end, she only ever released one other album. She says her job became satisfying his every sexual desire. Much of the prosecution case centred on how she was forced to partake in freak-offs. These were the drug-fuelled sex marathons where she alleges she was forced to have sex with a number of male escort sex workers. Sometimes these sessions would last days and the participants would have to have IV drips in order to recover afterwards. She said that their relationship was characterised by a major power and wealth imbalance. She said not only did he coerce her into sex, but that he regularly beat her. She said, in fact, on one occasion, he beat her so severely that she had to be hidden in a hotel room in order to recover from her injuries. And not only did the jury hear this disturbing testimony, they actually watched it too. The jury was played videos. These were entered as sealed evidence, so the public, journalists inside the courtroom, weren't able to see them. But what they showed were these freak-offs, these sex parties that Sean Combs would allegedly direct. And at one point, a male juror, pulled the headphones from his head, apparently unable to bear watching these videos anymore. So, those jurors have sat through some extremely disturbing detail. And when the judge in this case, Arun Subramaniam, when he dismissed the jury to go back to the jury room and consider their verdict, he thanked them for their service. They've been in this courtroom for 7 weeks now. It does appear they have at least reached a partial verdict, although we're not yet sure whether the judge is going to accept a partial verdict in lieu of the full verdict, and specifically that missing verdict on the racketeering conspiracy charge, which is the most serious of the charges that Sean Combs faces.
Yes, indeed. Just to repeat for those who have just joined us, the jury in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs has reached a verdict on 4 of 5 counts now, telling the court they are unable to agree on the racketeering charge, sending a note, we are unable to reach a verdict on count 1 as we have jurors with unpersuadable opinions on both sides. We're told, Martha, that Diddy himself is sitting surrounded by his 8 lawyers, talking to him with serious expressions, looking down, his hands crossed on his lap. The judge then asked the attorneys for suggestions on how to handle this. Prosecutors want the judge to read an Allen charge. Defence wants them to continue deliberating, saying they will not take a partial verdict. Both sides will submit their proposals to the judge, and he will then decide how to proceed and then bring them back in soon to speak to them. So it seems we're in something of a hiatus. The verdict has been reached on counts 2, 3, 4 and 5, but not, Martha, that serious count 1, which is the racketeering conspiracy.
Yeah, a huge moment of jeopardy in this case. And from what I'm hearing inside the court, that's very obvious in the demeanour of Sean Diddy Combs. He knows that the rest of his life hinges on the verdict that these 8 men and 4 women are about to deliver. I'm told that several of his children have now entered the courtroom. 6 of his 7 children have been present throughout almost all of this trial. He has twin daughters who are just 18 years old. He has older sons. One of his children is still a toddler, so obviously hasn't been inside court. His mother, Janice, has been there for almost the entirety of this trial. And when the judge sent the jury to deliberate a couple of days ago, his family gathered together. They held hands in prayer. They then all clapped. They left the room. And Sean Combs was left alone, hunched over his laptop. And you really got a clear sense of just how much his life has changed. You know, he was on top of the world, just 3 years ago. He had hundreds of millions of dollars to his name. His personal fortune has been dented now by numerous civil lawsuits that he's settled. But this is a man who used to think of himself as the king of this city. He used to go anywhere he wanted. Everyone would know his name. Some of the witnesses in this case said he was even more powerful than the police in this city. So I think you get a sense from that of his downfall. But I don't know whether it's helpful as well, Anna, for me to just detail the criminal count, which this jury says they've not been able to reach a verdict on due to at least one of the jurors being unpersuadable on the racketeering charge. So the racketeering conspiracy charge, which is the most serious of all the criminal counts that Sean Combs faces. It carries a potential sentence of life in prison. And interestingly, this racketeering charge is usually applied to multi-person crime organisations like the mafia. It's used in order to take down the head honcho and not just the foot soldiers. But in recent years, it has been applied in a more modern sense. In fact, it was applied in the trial of R. Kelly, another R&B music star. It was also applied in a case in Georgia against President Donald Trump. In order to reach a verdict on this case, in order to reach a guilty verdict on this case, the jury must decide that Sean Diddy Combs ran an enterprise to commit and cover up his crimes. So not just that he had an ordinary celebrity entourage, but that he used a network of employees, so bodyguards, assistants and so on, in order to cover up sex trafficking, drug distribution and other crimes. When explaining why the government believes that Sean Combs is guilty of racketeering, the prosecutors said that he was the general and not a foot soldier. One of the prosecutors, Christy Slavic, said, "Remember, this is his kingdom. Everyone was there to serve him." But the defence team almost laughed off the prosecution case. They said that the charges against him were greatly exaggerated